Have you ever noticed that some of the kindest individuals you've ever met are also some of the most exhausted souls? The ones who always appear, who always smile, who always say yes whenever you ask for assistance. But if you observe carefully enough, if you truly pay attention, you can notice the fatigue in their eyes. You can feel that hidden behind that kindness lies something heavier, something deeper, perhaps even something darker. We often imagine kindness as this simple, untainted good. We teach children to be gentle. We admire compassion in leaders. We measure our own humanity by how much empathy we extend. But kindness, like everything else in this complicated existence, carries a shadow. And when you deny that shadow, when you pretend it doesn't exist, kindness itself can slowly transform into something destructive. It begins quietly. A child realizes that being nice, being agreeable, earns them affection. When they set aside their own needs to make others comfortable, they are rewarded with smiles, praise, maybe even the warmth they didn't receive otherwise. With time, this association embeds itself deep within their nervous system. Kindness becomes survival, and as they grow older, it becomes harder to separate who they truly are from what others expect them to be. They turn into the dependable one, the good person, the friend who never complains. But here's the truth. When kindness is forced, when it is driven by fear of rejection or a desperate need to be valued, it stops being pure kindness. It becomes a mask. And masks, when worn too long, begin to suffocate the person underneath. Think about the people in your life who are endlessly giving. They listen to your problems for hours. They'll help you move. They lend money they don't even have. They'll sacrifice their own rest just to make sure you are okay.
Are you
At
sure?
first, it seems admirable, almost
It doesn't seem like
saintly.
much.
But if you've ever been that person, if you've played that role, you already know the truth. Behind every act of self-sacrifice lives a quiet resentment, a voice whispering, "What about me?" And that voice is often silenced because kindness, especially chronic kindness, carries an unspoken rule. You are not allowed to put yourself first. Psychologists have studied this condition and given it a name: compassion fatigue. It describes what happens when someone gives so much of their empathy, so much of their care, that they eventually run empty. Healthcare workers experience it, teachers experience it, even parents experience it. But it's not only about professions. Ordinary people, those who see themselves as kind souls, are at risk too. Research shows that people who consistently prioritize others above themselves report higher levels of anxiety, depression, and even physical illnesses compared to those who maintain balance. Kindness, when unchecked, becomes a slow self-erasure, and that is the darker side. Kindness without boundaries is not real kindness at all. It evolves into a subtle form of self-destruction. It's like watering every plant in the garden, except your own roots. Eventually, the garden collapses, and the entire garden withers along with them. But here's the more unsettling reality. Sometimes kindness itself turns into a weapon. And I don't mean in the obvious sense, like someone pretending to be pleasant to manipulate others. I mean the quieter, unconscious way. When you are known as the kind one, people start to expect it. They depend on it. They mold their behavior around it. And without even realizing, your kindness teaches others that your needs are secondary, that your feelings are negotiable. Over time, people stop even asking what you want, because they assume you'll always adapt to them. the kind person ends up teaching the world to overlook them. This creates a paradox. The kinder you are, the more invisible you become. And invisibility is not peace. It is loneliness disguised as politeness. Now, none of this means kindness is bad. Far from it. Genuine kindness is one of the most beautiful forces in the world. But there's a difference between kindness that flows from abundance and kindness that bleeds from emptiness. One heals, the other corrodes. One grows from love, the other from fear.
I just don't understand how we got to this point.
A study in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology found that people who struggle to say no, often those who identify as agreeable and kind, are significantly more likely to experience burnout. Another study from the University of Berkeley showed that altruistic behavior improves well-being, but only when it is voluntary and authentic. When kindness is performed out of guilt, obligation, or fear of disappointing others, it has the opposite effect, reducing happiness and increasing stress. And yet so many of us are trapped in this cycle. We don't want to let anyone down, so we keep saying yes. We don't want to be seen as selfish, so we keep giving. We don't want to risk losing love, so we keep sacrificing. But the cost of this endless kindness is devastating. Gradually, you lose sight of yourself. You no longer know what you want because your entire identity has been built on serving others. You become a stranger in your own skin. And here is where the monster within emerges. Because when you suppress your needs, when you deny your anger, when you bury your boundaries in the name of kindness, those emotions don't vanish. They gather in the shadows. They ferment, and eventually they erupt in ways you cannot control. Maybe it's snapping at someone you love for something small. Maybe it's passive-aggressive remarks, resentment leaking out in subtle ways. Or maybe it's even darker. Years of repressed feelings exploding at once, leaving you shocked by the person you've become. We like to imagine that kindness shields us from darkness, but in truth, kindness without honesty creates the perfect ground for it. Because every time you say yes when you mean no, every time you smile when you want to cry, every time you swallow your truth to keep someone else comfortable, you are not being kind. You are abandoning yourself, and self-abandonment always carries consequences. Now let's be real. Why do we do this? Why do kind people struggle so much with boundaries? The answer lies in our culture. From childhood, many of us are conditioned to believe that kindness equals worth, that being agreeable is safer than being authentic, that love must be earned by what we give, not by who we are. Children raised in homes where love is conditional, where affection depends on performance, obedience, or sacrifice, often carry this belief into adulthood. They become adults who mistake people-pleasing for kindness. But true kindness doesn't erase the self. True kindness includes the self. If your kindness is costing you your joy, your energy, your mental health, then it is no longer kindness. It is self-neglect disguised as virtue. And this is where knowledge helps. Neuroscience shows that the brain has something called the mirror neuron system. It's what lets us feel empathy. When you see someone in pain, your brain activates as though you're in pain too. That's why kindness feels natural to us as humans. We are wired to connect. But here's the catch. Mirror neurons don't distinguish between healthy empathy and destructive empathy. If you constantly expose yourself to suffering without boundaries, your brain floods itself with stress signals. Over time, this leads to chronic stress, immune issues, and emotional burnout. In other words, your brain is not designed for endless, boundaryless kindness. It's designed for balanced connection. So the dark side of kindness isn't that kindness itself is harmful. It's that kindness can be twisted by fear, by upbringing, by culture, by unhealed wounds into something that looks noble on the surface, but slowly devours us inside. And when that happens, the very thing we thought was our greatest strength becomes the very thing that breaks us. Now, let's pause and reflect. If you've ever felt this, the exhaustion, the resentment, the sense of being invisible, even while everyone calls you kind, you are not alone. You are not broken. You are not defective. What you're experiencing is the natural result of a world that never taught us to balance giving with protecting ourselves. It's the monster within, not because you're bad, but because unexpressed truths eventually demand to be seen. And this raises the real question. How do we embrace kindness without letting it destroy us? How do we stay compassionate without becoming martyrs? How do we love others without abandoning ourselves? The answer lies in one simple yet uncomfortable truth. Kindness must begin with you, not in a selfish disregard for others, but in the sense that if your kindness doesn't include yourself, then it isn't truly kindness at all. It's performance, and performance eventually collapses. Think of it this way. On an airplane, safety instructions say to put on your oxygen mask first before helping others. At first glance, that feels almost wrong. Why wouldn't I help my child or loved one first? But the logic is clear. If you lose consciousness from lack of oxygen, you can't help anyone. The same principle applies to kindness. If you neglect your own needs, your own rest, your own well-being, your ability to genuinely care for others eventually suffocates. This is where boundaries matter. And for many kind people, boundaries feel terrifying. They feel like rejection. They feel like selfishness. They feel like shutting people out. But in truth, boundaries are the purest form of honesty.
Are you sure?
A boundary says,
It doesn't
this is
seem
what I
like
can
much.
give and this is what I cannot. It says, my love is real, but it cannot survive if I am empty. It says, I care enough to show you my limits because without them, my care will decay into resentment. Psychologists describe boundaries as the invisible lines that define where you end and another person begins. Without them, relationships blur into dependency, manipulation, or silent suffering. With them, relationships become clear, mutual, and grounded in respect. In fact, research shows that people who set healthy boundaries often enjoy deeper, more meaningful relationships because their kindness comes from choice, not compulsion. And here's another fact. People who respect their own boundaries are seen as more trustworthy. Why? Because when they say yes, you know they mean it. Their kindness isn't forced, it's authentic. And authenticity is magnetic. But here's the challenge. Setting boundaries isn't just about saying no to others. It's about saying yes to yourself. And that can feel unsettling if you spent your life equating worth with selflessness. It can feel like betraying the very identity people admire you for. You might even lose relationships. Some won't like it when you stop overextending yourself. Some will push back, accuse you of changing, maybe even withdraw. And that's painful, but it's also necessary, because relationships built on the expectation of endless giving were never balanced in the first place. Now let's go deeper. There's a concept called pathological altruism. It describes when the drive to help actually causes harm, either to the giver or to the receiver. For example, when someone sacrifices their health to care for others, or when constant rescuing prevents the other person from ever learning independence. Pathological altruism looks like kindness, but it creates dependency, guilt, and burnout. It is kindness gone wrong. This ties into a larger cultural myth, the ideal of the good person. Many societies idolize kindness as the highest virtue, but often in a way that subtly encourages self-erasure. Think of phrases like, "She's such a good girl, she never causes trouble," or "He's such a nice guy, he helps everyone." Hidden in those compliments is a dangerous assumption that goodness means never asking, never refusing, never disrupting the peace. But real goodness isn't about erasing yourself. It's about showing up as your full, authentic self and still choosing compassion. When kindness grows from authenticity, it liberates. When it comes from fear, it enslaves. So what can you do to move from enslaved kindness to liberated kindness? Here are some practices. First, practice the pause. When someone asks something of you, don't immediately say yes. Take a breath.
I just don't
Give yourself
understand
space to
how we
check
got
in.
to this
Ask,
point.
do I have the energy for this? Do I want this? Is this aligned with my values? Even a few seconds of reflection can save you from automatic people-pleasing. Second, learn the art of gentle no's. A no doesn't have to be harsh. It can be caring. I care about you, but I can't take this on right now. Or, I'd love to help, but I don't have the capacity. The world won't collapse if you say no. In fact, your honesty builds respect for your yes. Third, reframe your worth. Your value isn't defined by how much you give. Your value is intrinsic. You existed before anyone needed you, before you learned to perform kindness to survive. You deserve love even when you say no, even when you rest, even when you carry nothing. Fourth, tend your own garden. Fill yourself with what nourishes you, friendships that enrich you, creative outlets, moments of stillness. When you live from abundance instead of depletion, kindness flows freely. It's not forced. It's not draining. It becomes a gift, not a transaction. Fifth, honor your harder emotions. Anger, frustration, sadness. These are not enemies of kindness. They are signals. They show you when boundaries are crossed, when needs are ignored. If you suppress them, they turn into the monster within. If you listen, they guide you back to balance. Let's return to the metaphor of masks. For many, kindness has become a lifelong mask. The smile you wear to hide exhaustion, the yes you give to avoid conflict, the generosity you offer to prove worth. But masks are heavy, and the longer you wear them, the harder it is to remember your own face. The real journey isn't to discard kindness, but to remove the mask and let kindness flow from the real you. The you who can say yes and no with equal honesty. The you who is kind without disappearing. There's an old saying, if you want to know who you really are, look at how you treat yourself when no one is watching. That is where authentic kindness begins, not in others' approval, not in the praise of being nice, but in the quiet choices you make for your own well-being. Do you rest when tired? Do you forgive yourself when you fail? Do you speak to yourself with gentleness? If not, your kindness to others rests on a fragile foundation. The irony is this: when you treat yourself with genuine kindness, your kindness toward others becomes stronger, not weaker, because it comes from overflow, not depletion. It inspires instead of drains. It lifts others alongside you instead of weighing you down. And maybe that's the final lesson. The dark side of kindness isn't about rejecting kindness. It's about transforming it, from mask into mirror, from compulsion into choice, from survival into love. So the next time someone tells you you're so kind, pause and ask yourself, is this kindness coming from fear or from freedom, from exhaustion or from abundance? From the mask or from the real me? The answer will reveal more than any compliment ever could, because at the end of the day, the monster within kind people is not their anger, not their limits, not their boundaries. The real monster is self-neglect. And once you face it, once you put down the mask, you'll find your kindness doesn't fade. It grows stronger, clearer, more radiant. It becomes the kind of kindness that doesn't just keep others alive, but keeps you alive too. And maybe that is the ultimate kindness, to live fully as yourself, without erasing, without performing, without apologizing. To show the world that compassion doesn't mean self-erasure, it means truth. That's the kindness the world needs most, not endless yeses, not silent suffering, but the courage to love without losing.